Welcome to Rugby Lives Here, a special segment on One Play Sports that looks specifically at local rugby. I'm happy to have Terence Khoo, SRU President. You're also the rep to the World Rugby for Asia Rugby, and of course, a former national team captain. Great to have you on the show. First of all, when you were playing national team captain, did you ever envisage yourself being an SRU President one day?
I think, first of all, Duncan, thanks for having me. No, I think looking back, I enjoyed my playing days, playing for school, playing for club, playing for uni. National team was a fantastic experience. But no, I don't think the thought ever did cross my mind that one day I might put myself up for election and maybe try to lead the sport. I mean, I grew up around the time when Dr. Chan Peng Man was president, and in my eyes, he did a fantastic job. So he was boss, and no, I never really thought of it.
3 years on, since you've been elected into Singapore Rugby as president, enjoyed yourself?
Yeah. It's been a really enjoyable journey. It was very challenging. Things were very different from what I had experienced in the time I was in the union to the game today. When I put myself up for election, I had some thoughts about what was important, and some of those things which were important came from a generation ago. So I had some thoughts about what it might be, and after 3 years, wow, I found that it's been a major change, and I think had to change course of what I did set out to achieve and what I wanted to do, and to spend a lot of time to reconnect with the ground, to understand what was important and what were the key drivers and touch points in order for me to construct a more solid and more robust program.
We'll talk about the changes that you've set out to achieve as SRU president, but do you feel like you gain a little bit more respect from the rugby community here in Singapore because you played the game and then now you're an SRU president, whereas perhaps in other sports, those at the top have not played the game?
I never did think about it that way. I only think of the experiences I've had as a player, representing our country and waving the flag. I think it brings along with one experiences, which I think are critical, because you've journeyed through a player's journey, an athlete's journey. You seem to understand the challenges, but whether it translates to respect or not, maybe I'm not the one to judge that.
You've seen changes since your playing days, and obviously now that you're trying to make changes as well to the sport. What in particular, or a couple of examples that has stood out for you since your playing days till now?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 things. I mean, first of all, as a backdrop, the sport of rugby went professional after the 95 World Cup. And when I was playing, professionalism was starting to take effect. And the things I did notice startlingly was the attention to player welfare. There's a lot more attention to head injuries assessments, making sure that the athlete, if there's any sign of concussion, is never let back onto the field. And if there's no pitch side care, no qualified medical support, then I think the game doesn't go on. So that's probably the second thing. And then probably the third thing was when I was in still my playing days, Singapore Rugby introduced women's rugby, and we had a women's national team. When I look back on those days, I look back now, I'm like, wow, it's like chalk and cheese. The women's skills are. I remember going down to my first training session with the national women's team. Like, wow, these guys are these guys are very serious. They're very good. I think skill level's gone up. I think a lot more competitive from when we were. Our national team still desires to perform well on the international stage and continue to do our best.
How important is as you say, the player welfare, especially with head injuries? Do you feel perhaps that maybe the old school guys might feel that rugby now is a bit more sanitized than it was before? We spoke off air. If you got hit in the past, you just had the magic sponge and you were told carry on and just carry on through that injury. Has the game changed in that sense?
Yeah, I think with the advent of professionalism and with more sports science, technology, there's a greater understanding and awareness of the need to look after the athletes who continue to put their bodies on the line. So I would never categorize it as it's for the soft guys. No, nowhere of that nature.
Okay.
And I think actually it's a very positive thing because it's a contact sport. It's physical. I think as a parent, or if you have a partner who's playing the sport, the partner or the parents do want assurances and understanding that the game is a contact sport. There are adequate measures to ensure that there is safety.
So, 3 years, as I said, at the start of your tenure as president, what was your mandate and where are you now in that process?
So if I look back, maybe if I touch on the national team first, if I look at the adults game in the 15-a-side, I think in the Asian Championships we started to progress up. 2019 we stayed in the division. We didn't really achieve the goals we wanted to, but I think we remained competitive. And then 2020, unfortunately, you know the story.
Yeah.
It's a COVID world. So I think the entire season for 2020 has changed. Sevens men also had an interesting run. In 2017, we had a silver at the SEA Games in Kuala Lumpur, but we weren't able to sustain the intensity. And again, if I look back 3 years, it's probably a mixed bag. So we won 1 silver in KL and we failed to medal in the Philippines last year. For women, I think women actually were very competitive. They won a silver as well in Kuala Lumpur. They continued to stay in the highest level of Asian Sevens competitiveness in the Asian Sevens Championships, the series, the 3 legs. In terms of pathway, I didn't go into my leadership trying to introduce rugby to more schools or to more clubs. I thought that we actually had enough, not so much enough, but we had adequate numbers of organizations and institutions who played rugby. But the biggest challenge was always retention and athlete retention and athlete pathway.
Just on the point of you talking about retention of players, when you look at the school level and rugby finals, for example, it's packed, the players are playing with passion. Where does the drop-off happen and why does it happen?
I think that's it's a very good question. I think that there is a great sense of loyalty and rivalry at the school level, but because our club competition framework at age group level and our club structure in terms of its administration and governance needed to be improved, we were not able to allow and attract a lot more athletes to transition from school competition into the club age group environment. And I think that's where the largest drop-off has been. Because a schoolboy playing rugby doesn't quite equate to a schoolboy getting picked for your national team. Yeah. You are talking about a boy and a man. I think a youth and adult, we're looking at a very serious strength and fitness differential. So there's no real ability for that to happen in the modern game. So we actually really need to work a lot harder to ensure that the athletes stay within the game, and the immediate transition is actually the club environment.
Where do you see the success for Singapore Rugby in the near future? Is it going to be 7s or is it going to be 15s?
I actually thought it was always going to be 15s. And then I realized that the 7s game there's sort of practical realities why we play 7s. 7s, we're always in medal contention at the SEA Games, and it also has a major impact on our funding. And being a small union with limitations on playing population, I think that there are clearly some pros to enable us to assemble a 7th team and be far more competitive. So I think 7s, while 15s is still the traditional game globally, and we will continue to support the 15s game. But if we were to compare them side by side, I would say that their 7s would have a slight edge over 15s.
Just moving on from that point when we were speaking about player retention, we know Singapore has a small population. For players who are picking up sport, they have to deal with, the need for educational excellence, first of all, national service for the men, and then there is, of course, the other sports that you have to compete with football or with table tennis or with badminton. So how do you plan to get more people involved in the game, whether be it administratively or whether just to start picking up the game? Is there a big plan in place?
I think the sport is exciting. It's robust. It has a very strong tradition in the schools. So there's no real competition in that respect. Maybe grades, like our parents do grades. But the sport succeeds. But again, if I can reiterate the point, the pathway is not quite there for us. The pathway is due largely to two major things, which I think are of great concern to me. One is an unbroken chain of age group competitions at a club level to enable athletes to go from age group to age group to age group while being in the club system. The second thing is the club's administration and governance also needs to be strengthened. I think our clubs exist for a variety of reasons. Some are recreational, some are very old boys, some are largely competitive, and some are slightly commercial. Important for us to align our agendas, because we haven't done so well in terms of helping us forge a common goal. And I think that starts with making sure that the club has adequate support from us. We want to invest more time and funds to ensure that the club leadership is strong. The other part about the club is probably coaching. I think we need to upscale our coaching capabilities. I think that coaches need to be increasingly professional. I think the days of fully amateur and volunteer coaches are past us if we want to be competitive out there. So to round off your point, I think that these are the two major issues, the pathway and our clubs.
So now you know what the problems are. I'm sure there are plans in place to rectify those problems. With that, there needs money to be pumped in to help this whole process. Where does SRU stand in terms of the finances? Is it healthy now?
I think we're okay. We've got some reserves. We are fortunate that Sport Singapore continues to support our high performance programs on a 4-year basis. However, as they say, money is never enough. If you aspire to go further than where you are, I think we've always got the need to find new revenues or sources of funds to drive our programs. So I think we've been reasonably successful. We've done golf days. Where golf days, there's some charity auctions, there's things like that. We've also created a Rugby Business Council, and the RBC is essentially a collection of former players or people who are captains of industry but actually have an affinity with the sport, either because their children play the sport or because they used to be players and they used to be involved. And that's been proven to be very successful in 3 areas. These groupings of people and captains of industry come together. We have dinners. We articulate the plans and the strategies moving forward, and we raise funds. We raise funds for specific programs, for specific causes. So that's one of them, and we've been fairly successful raising funds. The second area is that because they are captains of industry, they're in a position to either help hire national players, influence deals, open some doors for further sponsorship funding or donations. And I would say the third area would be providing our national players some jobs, some part-time jobs and opportunities to encourage them that to encourage them to stay in the game longer, because there is some level of security or sort of big brother support to point them in the next direction, especially when their playing careers are over. So I think the RBC, while it's helped us raise funds, it's also helped us achieve some other goals as well. So funding is an ongoing process. I would say that we're continuing to find new ways to raise funds, and sustainable funds at that.
It seems there is a clear pathway to success now, first with the schools, and then at club level, and then with the national team, and then obviously with the RBC to help surrounding all of that. I guess the question is, when will we see tangible results in terms of medals? And obviously it's difficult with Malaysia being a powerhouse. We've seen the emergence of Philippines in the 2019 SEA Games. When do you think we'll see tangible results?
If we look at the national team, I hadn't spoken about Simon, but we've been fortunate to hire Simon Mannix, who is a successful professional coach, former All Black. Together with some of the things we're putting together, I think that results can be seen in the, I suppose, 6 to 12 months. Especially, we thought that we would start to see our fortunes turn around. I think as you know that in most sport reconstruction, performance start to dip, and before they start to go up again after all your development efforts. And unfortunately, we weren't given the opportunity to prove it, because the entire international season's cancelled this year. So maybe we'll have to defer that to the next year. Again, it's a sport, and it's a slow sport at that, because we also need to compare ourselves against our neighbours, where we are developing, others are developing as well. So I think we need to be a little bit more patient, but in terms of my expectation, 2021 should be a decent year for us.
It is kind of a transition period, isn't it, for Singapore Rugby? But on the way up, Terence, great to have you on this episode of Rugby Lives Here. Having your SRU President hat on, I'm sure we'll have you on future episodes wearing a different hat. But for this particular episode, great stuff. Great to know that Singapore Rugby is healthy in itself, in its growth, and that you are driving it. So great to have you here, and all the best for Singapore Rugby in the future. And I'll take you up in 6 to 12 months. I'll be checking on you and Singapore Rugby to see if there are actual tangible results to look at. But in the meantime, thanks so much for Terence. This has been Rugby Lives Here, and I will see you for the next episode.